Once upon a time, far away from bustling cities and noisy crowds, nestled in a valley surrounded by tall mountains and whispering trees, there existed a small village. It was a quaint village, simple and serene, where life moved at the pace of the sun's journey across the sky. But there was a catch. The sky above this village was perpetually shrouded in darkness. The clouds seemed to have a personal vendetta against the sun, ensuring that its golden rays never touched the earth. This place was beautiful, yet it was burdened by a profound sadness, a longing for the light that never came. In this village lived a peculiar girl named Amara. She wasn't disliked or shunned, just misunderstood. You see, Amara didn't fit into the mold of what people expected from their children. While other children chased butterflies in the fields or played hide and seek among the trees, Amara preferred the company of her own thoughts and the colorful paint that adorned her small hut. Now, you might think painting is an innocent hobby, but in a village draped in perpetual twilight, it's a rather unusual one. In fact, the villagers often questioned Amara's actions. "Why paint when all you'll ever see is gray?" they would ask. "What use are vibrant colors when the world is devoid of light?" Their words stung like tiny darts, but Amara remained unfazed. She continued to mix her paints, her heart soaring with each stroke of her brush. Amara didn't paint flowers or landscapes. No, her canvases were always filled with stars. She painted twinkly stars that glittered against a backdrop of velvety black, stars that seemed to dance and shimmer with an otherworldly glow. And when the villagers saw her art, they couldn't understand it. Why paint stars when the real ones already shine? They would ask, but Amara saw more in those stars than just celestial bodies. She saw stories whispered across the cosmos, dreams carried on stardust, and hopes that shone brighter than any earthly light. To her, the stars weren't just up in the sky, they were everywhere. They were in the glistening dewdrop on a blade of grass, in the twinkling eyes of a child, and in the depths of a love-filled heart. One evening, as Amara sat painting a particularly vibrant star, a piece of cloth suddenly flew out of her window and landed in the hands of a traveler passing by. The man looked down at the cloth in his hand and gasped. There, shimmering before him, was a star, not a real one that twinkled in the darkness, but a painting that seemed to pulsate with life. Intrigued, the traveler decided to follow the trail of stardust that seemed to lead back to Amara's house. When he knocked on the door, Amara opened it, her eyes filled with innocence. The traveler, taken aback by her ethereal beauty, asked for the cloth back, explaining that it had blown out of her window. Amara, misunderstanding his intentions, thought he wanted to buy the painting, so she asked, "How much?" The traveler, confused, offered to trade her for something she needed. Amara, not realizing that he didn't want to buy the painting at all. Agreed. She traded him for a loaf of bread that she desperately needed and watched as he disappeared down the path, the cloth still clutched in his hand. The traveler, realizing that the girl had given him the only food she had, felt a pang of guilt. But he was also captivated by the painting on the cloth. He couldn't understand why she would paint something that already existed, especially since the girl probably hadn't seen a real star. Curiosity overwhelming his guilt, he turned around and headed back to the village. As days turned into weeks, the traveler couldn't shake off the memory of the girl with starlight in her eyes. He missed her innocent smile and the way she spoke about stars, as if they were old friends. More importantly, he couldn't stop thinking about the painting on the cloth. He had meant to return it to her, but it had become an obsession, a reminder of a world that existed beyond his own. One night, unable to bear the weight of his thoughts, the traveler packed his bags and set off to find Amara again. He walked for days, the image of the girl and her ethereal paintings guiding him forward. Finally, he heard the sound of rushing water and followed the melody until he saw the glimmer of a stream up ahead. And beside the stream stood the most beautiful hut he had ever seen. It was cozy and inviting, its windows glowing with a warm, inviting light. As he approached the hut, he heard soft music drifting out from within. Hesitantly, he knocked on the door, and a moment later, it swung open to reveal Amara standing in the doorway. She looked different now, older, yet still as beautiful as he remembered. The traveler, surprised to see her standing there, stammered, I came to return this." He held out the cloth with the painting, and, as Amara took it from him, their fingers brushed, sending a jolt of electricity between them. She looked up at him, her eyes shining with recognition, and for a moment the world stood still. The traveler, mesmerized by her presence, forgot all about returning home. He stood there, watching her, his heart pounding in his chest. Amara, sensing his gaze, asked, "Can I help you?" The traveler, startled by her question, quickly composed himself. "Oh, yes. I wanted to tell you," he began, but he couldn't bring himself to say what he had come for. Instead, he shifted the subject, asking about her paintings. Amara, sensing his hesitation, smiled and invited him inside. As the traveler stepped into her hut, he saw the walls were covered with paintings of stars, each one more vibrant and beautiful than the last. Some were tiny pinpricks of light, while others stretched across the canvas like rivers of gold. But it wasn't just the paintings that caught his attention. It was the emotions they evoked. Each star told a story, whispered a secret, and sang a song that resonated deep within his soul. He saw constellations of hope, galaxies of love, and nebulae of dreams. And as he gazed at them, he realized that these weren't just paintings. They were portals to another world, a world where anything was possible and everything was beautiful. In that small hut, the traveler saw more beauty than he had ever seen in his life. He saw it in the way the light danced on Amara's skin, in the curve of her smile, and in the sparkle of her eyes. But most of all, he saw it in her paintings, which were more than just art. They were a testament to the power of the human spirit to find beauty in darkness and hope in despair. Over the next few days, the traveler stayed in Amara's hut, talking for hours about everything and nothing. He learned about her dreams and her fears, her hopes and her struggles. And in turn, he shared with her his own story, the story of a man who had lost his way, but found it again in the most unexpected of places. Together, they explored the nearby hills, climbed the tallest trees, and sat by the riverbank, watching the stars twinkle above them. It was a magical time, a time when the world seemed to be theirs and theirs alone. But as the days turned into weeks, reality began to set in. The traveler knew he couldn't stay there forever. He had responsibilities waiting for him back in the city, and he couldn't just abandon them. With a heavy heart, he said goodbye to Amara, promising to return soon. And as he walked away from her hut, he couldn't help but feel that something had changed. The world seemed a little brighter, the colors a little more vibrant, and the stars a little closer. From that day on, the traveler became a regular visitor to the village. Whenever he felt lost or in need of guidance, he knew he could find solace in Amara's company. And as the years went by, their friendship deepened into something more. They fell in love, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. And when they stood under the stars, their love for each other seemed to echo the love that the stars had for the earth. Together, they made plans to share Amara's paintings with the world, to show people that even in the darkest of times, there was always light to be found. They traveled to nearby towns and villages, setting up stalls and displaying Amara's artwork. At first, people were confused by her paintings. Why paint stars when the real ones shine? They would ask, but as they gazed at the paintings, their faces would slowly transform. A glimmer of hope would appear in their eyes. A spark of joy would light up their smiles, and a sense of wonder would fill their hearts. The paintings didn't answer the why of existence. Beauty in a world that often seemed too harsh to appreciate it. As word of Amara's paintings spread, people from far and wide came to see her work. Some saw constellations of hope, others saw galaxies of memories, and some simply saw beauty. For Amara, it didn't matter what people saw in her paintings. All that mattered was that they saw something worth cherishing, something that made them feel alive. Throughout it all, Amara never became rich. She lived a simple life, content with what she had. She continued to paint, her hands moving across the canvas with a grace that seemed almost otherworldly. And as she painted, she shared her gift with everyone she met, reminding them to look up and dream. Many years later, when Amara was old and gray, children would gather around her, their eyes shining with curiosity. "Why stars, Nana Amara?" they would ask. "Why did you paint stars when the real ones were up there?" Amara would smile, her eyes twinkling with mischief. Because even in the darkest of times, she would say, "I wanted to give people light." And as she spoke, the children would look up at the stars, their imaginations soaring, knowing that even when the world seemed dark and scary, there was always light to be found. They just had to look for it.